Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar today. And I would like to welcome each and every individual who has joined in, taken out their precious time, and made some provisions to go through the webinar which will be conducted today. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Manoj Phadke. I represent the corporate team from Financial Hospital. The main role of corporate team is to ensure that we conduct investor awareness programs. We also have certain corporate tie-ups as well with certain corporates in terms of creating financial awareness and employee awareness related to financial terms. Also, at the same moment, about Financial Hospital, I'm sure that not all would be aware about what Financial Hospital is. Basically, Financial Hospital has been into market since year 2004, and we have successfully serviced each and every client, either it is from India or abroad. So, may it be financial planning, tax advice, or investment planning in equity, debt, or any alternate category. So our team is always backed by a strong research and latest economic trends, and they are always ready to serve our investors any query or needs. So we have a team of rich experience of our professional teams who comprise of CAs, MBAs, certified financial planners, and other technocrats. And with the knowledge of the markets, strong leadership, innovative and focused research, we have approximately 7 offices across India. So Financial Hospital itself defines its value and success story. So this is a short bit of story about myself and Financial Hospital. I would now be providing a heads up about today's presenter. His name is Mr. Mihir Shah. He's a senior financial planner at Financial Hospital. And Mihir is an MBA and obviously one of the youngest financial planner in Financial Hospital at this point of time, carrying more than 3+ years of experience, and who has successfully managed financial planning projects from inception to completion for HNI and ultra HNI clients. One thing that Mihir always stands by is that financial planning gives one more clarity in life. It provides direction and meaning to one's financial decision. And he believes that more than direct selling or financial product, planning and eventually executing them to achieve individual goals needs to be prioritized. So I would now like to hand over the reins across to Mr. Mihir Shah, who will go ahead and take you through the presentation. And now this presentation would be divided in two parts. The first part wherein Mihir takes you through the guided PPTs which have the knowledge about the presentation. Okay. And the second part wherein we will take you through a certain set of question and answers. In case if you have any questions, please do ask them. There is a Q&A box which is on the extreme left of your screen. So do not hesitate to ask any question that you have. And we would be more than happy to take all the questions if possible during the allocated time. Thank you so much. I will hand over the call across to Mr. Mihir Shah now.
Thanks, Manoj. A good afternoon to everyone, all the people who are here for the webinar. First of all, I hope all of you are safe and all are doing well at home. So like Manoj said, the topic for today is budget 2020, specifically with respect to your income tax. What are the implications and what are the new, things that are brought up in the budget? And also we'll be, taking a look into the current market scenario, the current volatility that is there in the market. So these are the two things that we'll mainly discuss. So how this will be distributed is I will be talking for approximately 35 to 40 minutes. I'll be giving you a brief about both the topics, after which we'll have a Q&A session. Starting with the presentation, first of all, obviously there were a lot of implications that were there on the budget, but here we'll be mainly looking at the income tax section, which is mainly what you all can particularly relate to when you are filing your form 16s. So what are the implications on the budget, specifically on the income tax? So there are a few things that the government actually brought up. The tax charter. So what is a tax charter? Basically, when you see a company, all of these companies, you have an article of association, you have a memorandum. Similarly, a tax charter, what that will mainly do is basically it will distribute your rights. Basically, you all will know what your fundamental rights are. There will be a proper briefing from the government side just to make sure that there are no complications and there is a lot of transparency. Next is faceless appeal. Basically, if there's any scrutiny, any problem that you're facing, you can do all of that online. You don't need to actually visit to the office and do it on a one-to-one on a physical basis. All of that can be done online. One of the main things that the government has brought up with respect to income tax was Vivad se Vishwas. So if you see, there were a lot of pending cases. Even probably some of y'all, might be having cases that are still pending. There must be some disputes that y'all must be having with respect to your income tax returns. So what the government has said is that if by 30th June 2020, if all of that is cleared, if y'all pay your dues, there will be no interest charge. So for example, if you have a case that is going on, say, since 2017, from there 2017 to 2020, obviously there will be a certain payment that you owe the government. And on these 3 years, also a certain interest component will be levied. But what the government is saying that if you clear all of that by 30th June 2020, there will be no interest charge. And all you need to do is just pay off your basic principal. So basically what the government tried and did through this budget, and specifically with respect to income taxes, they wanted to be very transparent. They wanted to be very accountable in terms of what they are providing to you. So these were the, a basic idea. Now, when we're talking about the old versus new regime, I think this is something that everyone wanted to actually know. So what the government has done is now that you have two regimes. One is the old regime and the second is the new regime. And you're free to choose which regime that you actually want to opt for. But what they've done is that, see, if you're following the old regime, what you actually be following, you can claim all your deductions, be it ATC, be it ATD, your housing cost, be it your EMI that you're paying, or the HRA that you're claiming. All of that can still be claimed as per the old regime. What they've done basically in the new regime is that they've reduced the rates. If you see the slabs from 5 lakh to 7.5 lakh, from 7.5 lakh to 10 lakh, it's a reduced rate comparatively when you compare that to your old regime. But what they've said is that you cannot claim any deductions apart from your basic standard deductions. You cannot claim your ATC, you cannot claim your ATD, you cannot claim your HRA. All of those deductions cannot be claimed under the new regime. So the main question arises is that what regime should an individual opt for? Obviously, all of your salaries will be different. The deductions that you'll claim will be different. So just in the next couple of slides, we'll also highlight on that aspect, that what regime is actually most suitable to you. Another important aspect as an individual was that DDT, which is the dividend distribution tax, that the government said that this will now be taxable in the hands of the investor. So previously, what used to actually happen was that a company, whenever they declare their results, their profit after tax. So basically, suppose they have 100 rupees, then they pay off their taxes, say 20 rupees, and 80 rupees is their profit after tax. On this 80 rupees, the company declares dividend, and then on this dividend that the company declares, the company was supposed to pay tax. So the problem that was actually occurring was there was double taxation. So the company was paying double taxes. So to make sure that this does not happen, what the government has done is that now the dividend that the company is distributing, the investors will get it, and as per their tax slab, the dividend will be taxable. Another important aspect in the budget that I would like to highlight on was that the levy of perquisite tax. So obviously, from your employer's point of view, there are a lot of contributions that your employer does, be it your EPF, be it your NPS, be it your superannuation. So what the government has said that up to rupees 7.5 lakhs per year, it will be non-taxable. But if your employer contribution with respect to your NPS, your EPS, your superannuation, anything above 7.5 lakhs, it will be taxable. So this is basically, taking into consideration for people who are, HNIs or ultra HNIs. This is mainly, for people who are earning, more than 30, 40, 50 lakhs of rupees. The employer contribution is relatively high. So if this contribution exceeds 7.5 lakhs, previously there was no limit, but now if this exceeds 7.5 lakhs, this will be taxable. Second is basically what the confusion was that can I keep switching between the old regime and the new regime? Can I not do that? That was a confusion that people had. So what the government has said is pretty clear, what they've said is that if you're an individual or you're an HUF and you have no business income, basically all the income that you have is basically you're doing your day-to-day job, you're a salaried individual, you have the option to opt for the new regime or the old regime every year. So for example, say in the year FY 2021, you opted for the new regime, you have the option to switch back to the old regime in FY 21-22. So that is the option that you still have, but the important aspect is that you should not be having any business income. Now, for people who actually have business income, they have their own businesses, they're running their own businesses, they're not salaried, they have their own family businesses. What the government has said that you have an option to choose only once. So once, if you choose to opt for say the new regime, then you have to continue with the new regime. Even for the next year, even for the next couple of years, if you want to change, you cannot do that. So for that, the government has been pretty clear. Now, this is just basically, if you can see your basic salary slip, your basic Form 16, you must be seeing these components. So what I've done is I've just a few bifurcations about what you can claim in your old regime and what you can claim in your new regime. So as you can see, when you talk about HRA, when you talk about LTA, all of that you can still claim, yes, in the old regime. But when you're talking about the new regime, you cannot claim any of these deductions. When you talk about your basic ATC, which I think most of you all will be claiming, that also you can still claim in your old regime, but in your new regime, that is something that you cannot claim. Just a couple of important aspects that I would like to highlight upon in this is one is with respect to your medical insurance and medical expenses. So obviously you can claim that in your old regime, but when it comes to the new regime, you cannot claim it. But the only exemption that has been given is that if you are, there is a self disability that you have, then the government has said that okay, then that is one condition that is satisfied, then you're able to claim it. Apart from that, like I have been saying, your education loan, your ATC, your HRA, your LTA, none of that can be claimed under the new regime. However, what the government has also said is once you retire, obviously you have accumulated a lot of wealth, say in the form of your PF, in the form of your gratuity, in the form of your superannuation. All of that all of that will still remain not taxable as per the old regime or the new regime. So the government has been clear on that front. Now what we'll do is basically I've created a few scenarios. Obviously some of you all will can actually relate to this. So I've created a scenario. So from people who have income of rupees 5 lakh up to rupees 20 lakhs. So I've created a various slabs, say from 5 lakh, 6 lakh, 7 lakh, 10 lakh, 12 lakh. And what I've done is if you're opting for the old regime, then what are the tax that you're paying? And if you're opting for the new regime, then the tax that you're actually paying. Is then there are two exemptions that you're claiming. So ATC. So basically you're utilizing your entire ATC of rupees 1,50,000. Second is you also have a housing cost. By housing cost, I mean either you're claiming your HRA or you're claiming your housing loan interest, your EMIs that you're paying. So in the interest component, you're claiming that up to rupees 2 lakhs and you're claiming your ATC. So now when I'm talking about the old regime, say if you're earning say 5 lakh, 6 lakh or 7 lakh 50 and you're claiming your ATC and you're claiming your HRA, then the tax liability for you is zero. But say if you're earning more than 10 lakh, say 12 lakh, 15 lakh, 20 lakh, then you can see there's a certain amount of tax that you're paying even after claiming these deductions. Now when I shift that to the new regime, if you see in the 6 lakh and the 7 lakh 50 slab, because I'm not able to claim any deductions, even with a lower tax rate in the new regime, I am still paying 23,400 rupees extra. So in this scenario, if you're seeing the old tax regime is way better than the new regime. This is up to a certain condition that you're claiming your entire ATC and also you have a housing interest cost. So I hope this is clear. Obviously, if you have any questions to this, we'll be answering that towards later. But again, the important thing here is that you're claiming these deductions. A question may arise that what if I'm claiming more deductions? Suppose having your 80D, you have your LTA, then obviously the old regime will still be better for you, because even after claiming these only two deductions, your old regime is still better than the new regime in this scenario. Now we'll take another scenario into consideration. Similarly, we have the same income slabs for all of y'all. But now the only deduction that you're claiming is ATC. So only the deduction of rupees 1,50,000 is what you're claiming. You have your own house. You're not staying on rent. You are not having any housing cost. You've paid off all your EMIs. So the only deduction that you're claiming is rupees 1,50,000. So now again, in this case, say if you're still within the 10 lakh rupee slab, 10 lakh or within that slab, the old regime is still better for you because you're still paying lesser taxes in the old regime. But now when I'm talking about, say, if you're earning 12 lakh 50, 15 lakh, 20 lakh, and ATC being the only deduction that you are claiming, the new regime is beneficial for you because in the new regime, the benefit that you're getting is lower taxes. So this computation has been done taking into consideration all these factors. So again, just repeating my point, in this example, the only deduction that you're claiming is ATC, and up to say 10 lakh rupees, the old regime is still beneficial for you. But post that, the new regime will be more beneficial for you because you're getting, because you're not claiming any deductions, but you're getting a lower tax rate. Coming to the final scenario, in this scenario, okay, basically what you are doing is you're not claiming any deductions, you're not claiming your ATC, you're not claiming any other deduction of any form, you do not have any housing cost. Then easily the new regime is way more beneficial for you. But as you can see, like in today's scenario, there is something or the other, be it some contribution by your employer or even your contribution towards your PF, or you must be having some health insurance or your medical insurance. That may be a case. But if that is not the case, and if, for example, you are someone who is a business oriented person, and your cash flow keeps revolving around your business, or even you can be a salaried, but you do not have that, you do not have insurance, you're not claiming any deductions, then you can actually go and opt for the new regime, and because that will be way more beneficial for you. So taking into consideration, say if I'm earning 7.5 lakhs, I'm getting a benefit, I'm paying less taxes by rupees 15,600 in the new regime. Similarly, if I'm earning 15 lakh or I'm earning 20 lakhs per year and I'm not claiming any deductions in my form 16, then the new regime is beneficial for you because that's where you actually get the benefit of lower taxes. So I hope this part is clear. Again, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. But again, just to repeat myself, you have to make sure that the two deductions that you're claiming, if you're claiming, a lot of deductions, be it ATC, be it housing, be it LTA, then the old regime is beneficial for you. But going forward, if you think that you actually do not need to invest in these things, you can invest that money into, say, another asset class, where you might not be getting tax benefits but you get higher returns, then you can actually go and opt for the new regime. So now, talking about the current market scenario, obviously you must have seen that there is a lot of volatility. There has been a lot of disruption when it comes to the business. There has been work from home, technology is being utilized, what previously was not happening. We are having conferences, we are having seminars, we are having webinars, everything is happening from home. So the way things are working out now, obviously there is a lot of disruption, and what we'll do is we'll just take into consideration from a macroeconomic point of view and also how that is impacting India. So what is the actual impact that COVID-19 is having? Apart from it is a health crisis, but there also can be a situation where this can actually lead to a financial crisis. It can actually lead to India the global economy becoming a recession. So if you see, there has been a weakening of all global economic indicators. A lot of people are actually losing their jobs, or even post things start getting slightly better. For people to find a new job in the short run, all of that is going to be difficult. Manufacturing plants have been shut down, production is at a standstill. So not only India as a country, but worldwide, this is going to have an impact. Second, if you see, there has been a bear run in major global indices. By bear run, you mean that if you see your basic stock market, you can see how that has fallen. Your Nifty levels were, which were previously 11,800, 12,000, that has now fallen down, and it's ranging towards the 9,000 level. So you can see how people have actually lost wealth, because there is that fear in the market. People want liquidity in their hands. People are removing money from the market. So you can see that major of the indices, be it the US index, be it Singapore, Japan, India, all of that, there has been a bear run. Again, the manufacturing sector is suffering due to disruption of the global supply chain. Production is at a standstill. Transportation is still a major issue. Obviously, post the 20th, our government has said that slowly we can start you know uh, production and manufacturing, and certain businesses can still open. But again, to that to happen at 100% capacity, coronavirus has to completely come to a standstill. So until that happens, your manufacturing is going to suffer, your exports is going to suffer. So all of that is obviously going to take place. Now, previously, as per 2020, there were a lot of forecasts that what rate will India grow, what rate will China grow, what rate will other countries grow. So people were predicting, India and China and Indonesia, basically your Asian countries, to grow, somewhere close to 5% to 6%. All your already well-developed countries, say Japan, USA, they were, targeted to grow somewhere in the range of 1.5 to 2%. But post the crisis, what has happened is this has taken a big hit. Obviously, the demand will be less, even though the supply will be less. So this will, actually create a scenario where it will become very difficult for a country to grow. So what they've done is that they've revised the rates. So India, if previously they had predicted that it's going to grow by 6%, that they've reduced down to 2.1%. Similarly, for China, if previously they predicted that it is going to grow by 5.9%, currently they've predicted that now this will grow by 1%. Similarly, if you see that UK, France, all of them have been predicted to grow negatively. So as you can see, Corona has had a major impact. But the only positive that you can see from an Indian perspective is that India and China are the only two countries where they are still expecting positive growth. So which will actually mean that India will be at a benefit from that perspective, because your foreign investors, your foreign portfolio investors will still see the Indian market as beneficial, because that is one of the only two countries where there is actually positive growth. Now, if you see the GDP of India, obviously when you're talking about 2014-15, it was growing by 7.5 to 7% in that range. But over the last 2 or 3 quarters, that has even reduced. So even the post-Corona crisis, the GDP of India was irrespective, it was reducing. Say from 6% it has reduced to 5%, and then 4.5%. So that was anyways happening. So there were a lot of issues that India as a country was facing internally as well. So Corona has further impacted that growth. Now, so obviously, post the Corona crisis, what has the government done, to make sure that there is, sufficient liquidity in the market, to make sure that, your small and medium enterprises, how they can survive, for people, who are below poverty line, if they cannot afford the food, what has the government done for them? So first, talking from a health perspective and then from a financial perspective, what the government has done for the underprivileged is that what they've done is they've provided 5 kg rice or wheat, any one of them, and 1 kg dal of their choice for free for 3 months. Next, what they've done is for obviously our healthcare workers who are working so hard, for our sanitation workers who are actually keeping the roads clean, for your basically all your doctors and nurses who know are 24 hours in and out working for the safety of us, what they've done is that they have kept a medical insurance of rupees 50 lakh. So God forbid if something is supposed to happen through to them during this crisis, their family gets 50 lakh rupees. So that is something that the government has done for them. Farmers will get 2,000 rupees as front load directly into their accounts. Second, one of the most important factors is infusion of liquidity into the market to the tune of rupees 1 lakh crore announced by the RBI. So post the crisis, if you've seen, the RBI has actually come and had two major announcements. This was one of the few. This was the first major announcement that they'll infuse 1 lakh liquidity into the market. So why they've basically done is that so that the banks are willing to lend it out to the public, so that the public do not face any cash crunch, and to make sure that there is a certain amount of spending, there is a certain amount of demand. To make sure that that happens, the government has infused this much money. They've provided this to the banks, and in turn the banks will provide it to us as customers, and then in turn we'll actually go ahead and spend it on all our basic necessities. Another really important thing that the government did was a 3 month moratorium period to be offered by banks in case of loans. So basically, if you have any personal loan, or you have any housing loan, the government understands that in these 3 months, and even probably post that, you will face cash crunch, because you may not have that similar income. There may be a salary cut, or if you have a business income for that matter, that will actually come to a standstill. So it may get difficult for you to pay your EMIs, say, going forward. So to make sure that they've given an option that if you want, for the next 3 months, you cannot pay your EMI, and that will be okay. You will not, this is something that will not actually go ahead and affect your CIBIL score. But again, if you're asking me for advice, if you do not have that liquidity crunch, if you're still able to actually go ahead and pay these EMIs, then you should go ahead and actually pay these EMIs. Otherwise, what happens is, post these 3 months, what will happen is your uh, loan tenure will automatically increase, which will actually mean that the interest that you're actually paying will increase. Obviously, in these 3 months, you will get a certain relief, but going forward, it will not affect your CIBIL score, but your loan tenure will actually increase, which means that you will have to pay more interest. But this is the option that the government has given, so you can opt to pay it or you cannot opt to pay it. That is completely up to your liquidity that you have. Next, talking about your basic deductions like your ATC, your HRA. Previously, what happens is you can claim that till 31st March, till your Form 16s are actually issued. You can actually go ahead and claim those. But the government understands that this is a scenario where people may not have done that. So what they've done is, you can still invest in a tax saving instrument till 30th June 2020, and you can still count that in your financial year 1920. So that is one more major benefit that the government has given. Another important thing that the government has done is that they've relaxed the tax collection measures to provide relief to the Indian SME sectors. So I think basically what you can see is that if you have your major companies, your multinational companies, they still might have the liquidity. They can still survive something like this, going without the same revenue that they previously had. But when you're talking about small and medium enterprises, they are the ones who will actually face trouble, because they might still have to pay their rent, they might still have to pay their salaries, and all of that is obviously dependent on what they're actually getting. But in a time like this, high chances that they do not have that liquidity, there is no income for them. So going forward, there might be problems for them. So to make sure, what the government has done, one is that the tax collection measures have been subdued. Second, recently again, last week, the RBI again came and made a few announcements. They said that they'll again be pumping in 50,000 crores of liquidity specifically for these sectors. So what they'll do is they'll transfer these money to these NBFCs, to these banks, and then in turn they can help these small and medium enterprises, so that that liquidity remains, that they can still survive in a market like this. So now, an important question that there is, that now how will India actually bounce back from a scenario like this? So there are three scenarios that can actually happen. One is the V-shaped recovery. In a V-shaped recovery, as the letter suggests, that the way that the country has fallen, the growth, the GDP, your exports, your imports, there's the spending capacity. What they are expecting is how, for example, even how the market has fallen. Similarly, in the same way, there'll be a quick recovery. So the speed at which the country fell, the same way the country will rise. But this can only happen if the containment is done quickly. So obviously the lockdown is there. There's almost been a 40 days lockdown, but I think still when you compare to other countries, India is still doing better. But if you see the number of cases that are actually uh, happening per day, that has not substantially reduced. So a V-shaped recovery it is a possibility. It is difficult. Obviously, we will be hoping for the best, but what we have to do is prepare for the worst. If it is a V-shaped recovery, then there's nothing like it. But for that to happen, we have to contain the virus. The vaccine has to be ready. So a V-shaped recovery again is difficult, but it's still a possibility. The most likely scenario from my perspective is a U-shaped recovery. Is basically that even post this fall, there will still India will still take a few months, probably say 6 months or 8 months or probably even a year, to still recover, and after that you can see the growth. So the most likely possibility, as per me, was this, because basically it says that the lockdown is actually going to go on for more periods. Say it may get extended or it may not get extended. If it's not extended, then it's going to be a very phased wise recovery. Government is not going to start everything all at once. uh, Second is that the vaccine testing is almost in their third or fourth stage. It's not a ready vaccine yet, but they are almost towards that stage, which may happen say in September or in October. So U-shaped recovery looks most likely. But the worst case scenario that can happen is the L-shaped recovery. Is that the fall is sharp, and also it takes a huge amount of time for India to recover as a country. Not only India, even when you're talking about from a macroeconomic point of view, majority of the major economies in the world might face this scenario. So obviously this is a worst case scenario if we're not able to contain the virus at all. If there is a second wave of the virus, say post a few months, then growing of a country becomes very difficult. So these are the three scenarios. Again, you have to hope for the best but prepare for the worst. Now, what can be done? So as an investor at this point in time, what are a few things that you can do? So this is just a basic slide. Is basically even previously we have had certain viruses. Again, none of them have been as serious as what is happening currently. You had your Ebola, you had your SARS virus that happened in end of 2002 and start of 2003. Even then there was panic in the markets. The markets fell, but post that, after 1 year, the markets had recovered. So this is what you call actually a V-shaped recovery. So if the markets that during SARS fell by 11%, there was a 80% recovery in the market. So people have actually made that much money post the SARS virus. But again, taking coronavirus into, I think none of the above viruses were termed as pandemic. Coronavirus was the only virus out of these that is actually been claimed as a pandemic. So that is one situation. So this is not only a health crisis, but it may going ahead even may lead to a small financial crisis. But again, there is not a better opportunity than this to invest into equity, into the stock market, into the Nifty 50 index. So be it investing through mutual funds, doing SIPs. This is one of the best time because market is almost near to bottom. No one can predict the bottom, but you can see the market moving within a certain range. The market has taken a massive hit. So this is a very good opportunity to invest in the equity market, because based on past history, whenever something like this has happened, the market has also created wealth. The market has also recovered sharply. Now, so what do now you need to do in this scenario? So it is very important that you have an emergency fund. So talking about, so if for example you are the only sole earning member in your family, it is important that at least 6 months of your mandatory expenses you should have in your bank in terms of emergency corpus, in terms of times like this. So it can be this, it can be a medical emergency. But if you are the only earning member in your family, at all times it is important that you have 6 months of mandatory expenses in your bank account. Another important question that people have is that should I stop my SIPs? Should I redeem my money? What do I actually need to do? So the answer is pretty simple. If you have your SIPs going on, there is no need to panic, because SIPs, I'm sure you've done your SIPs from a long term point of view. This is just a minor glitch that is there. Uh, from an advantages point of view, you can see that you're able to get more units at a lower price at this point in time. And I think SIP is something that you cannot stop. But if you think that it is actually impacting your cash flows majorly, it is actually taking a major chunk of your money, then at worst you can probably stop it for a couple of months, but not more than that. But as an advisor, what we would do is we would advise not to stop your SIPs, because you're obviously doing it from a long term point of view. Second is that it is important that you stay away from the direct stock market. So direct equity, by that I mean actually trading in this market, that becomes very risky. And a complete no is trading into future and options. So that, because at this point in time there is a lot of volatility, you may, in fact, there might be a chance that you may lose all your money that you actually invested. So FNOs is a big no. Again, I think it's important for you to understand what your risk appetite is. If you think that you are someone who might be someone who is willing to take that risk, then you can possibly invest into direct equity if you're sure. But it is important to understand that currently the equity market is it is more of a traders market. People are just investing, booking their profits, and leaving. It is not an investors market. So again, I think it's important that you know what your risk appetite is. Second is it is important to have a portfolio review of your current investments. You should plan your finances in that way going forward. Obviously this is a one case scenario where something, this such a big event has happened, but it is important to make sure that going forward you have the correct mutual funds, or you're invested into the correct sector. And most importantly, this is a scenario that will pass. This is something that is not going to actually go remain for the long term. So it is important to have a positive mindset and take into consideration that this too shall pass. Next is, what are the various classes that you have where you can invest, and what are the impacts. First, talking about equity, if you are willing to invest in the equity, large caps and index fund. By index fund I mean you investing into the Nifty index itself is one of the safest bets that you have right now. One is that the risk is relatively less, the volatility is relatively less, and if the Nifty index, if the large cap stocks are doing well, automatically your entire equity and stock market does well. So your safest best bet is doing that. Secondly, you should avoid investing currently into mid cap and small cap stocks. Again, there's survival, not many of the companies may actually survive something like this. Only the companies which have that liquidity will actually survive. So one important thing in mind is that avoid small caps and mid caps. Make sure that your SIPs are going into the right funds, and if you're willing to invest at this point in time, only opt for large cap and index funds. Second is debt. So debt, I mean, there is not a major change, but couple of things that you need to know is that your fixed deposit is your best bet when you talk about short term, because that will actually give you that safety. Second is you can also opt for something like a guaranteed return. This is done for the long term. This is something that is highly suggestible at this point in time, so that you have a second asset class. You are just not dependent on one asset class. You have another asset class that is going to give you guaranteed returns in the long term. Debt and liquid mutual funds, which are said to be relatively safer and stable when you compare to equity. They give you a stable return on a year on year basis. There is a high risk in them, because there might be a lot of companies that might default. There might be a lot of commercial papers or long term bonds that they have, that they might default and not pay. So this might actually impact your debt mutual funds. Another aspect is gold. So gold, I think you can purely take it for hedging purposes. By hedging purposes I mean with your equity and your debt, you should have 10 to 20% of your portfolio into gold. Because as you all know, equity and gold are inversely related. If the stock markets go up, gold prices fall down, and vice versa. So to make sure that your risk is minimized, you can have a certain amount of money into gold. Again, I think insurance is a must, irrespective of the scenario. But I think at this point, you'll understand the importance of having a term insurance, having a health insurance, having a critical illness plan. That is something of top priority at this point in time. And real estate, again, I think negative, because builders may not have funds. It'll be very difficult how the projects will be completed on time. Appreciation in real estate looks very difficult at this scenario. So real estate is something that you should avoid. Just to summarize this, you can invest into equity, try and limit your exposure into debt, but you can opt for guaranteed return plans. Invest 10 to 20% of your portfolio into gold, and insurance is a must at any cost in time. Just a quick brief: what sector going forward will benefit? There are obviously majority of them are negative, but I'm specifically talking about the ones that I think are going to be positive. One is pharma and healthcare. I think there is a massive opportunity for pharma. I think India as a country can is all, even currently we are one of the major exporters. We are providing our medicines to countries around the world. But still, if you see, there is still a lot of scope, because the pharma infrastructure in India is still not that well developed. So that is a massive opportunity. Other countries will rely on India for their research and development, for the medicine and the drugs that we provide. So we can see a lot of investment happening in this sector. So this is a massive positive. Second is FMCG. Obviously, even in this scenario, you're not going to stop using your basic necessities. You're not going to not brush your teeth. You're going to use your soaps. You're going to eat your basic necessities. So FMCG is going forward, it is going to be a positive. And another positive sector where we see a lot of growth is IT. So India's even currently India is already a IT hub. The major source of revenue for IT companies is obviously through exports. But again, like we discussed previously, working from home, webinars, seminars, even schools, your education, everything will now happen online. So IT will play a major part. So again, going forward, these are three positives overall in the sector analysis. So just concluding, I'll just conclude by this: is that people ask that what is financial planning and why is it beneficial to start early. So I just have a few slides going forward, and what is the actual benefit of starting early, and what is financial planning as a whole. So if you see, the times are changing. As you can see, my dad had one pair of shoes and used it for 5 years. I have 5 pair of shoes and I use it for 1 year. So times are changing. The way that the youth of today is thinking, the way that we are spending, the way that we are saving. Previously, all of that was completely different. The technology, is playing a major role. Now, talking about previously, when you talk about our parents, or even before that, they had a basic principle that they'll earn. From that, they'll save a certain amount, and then they'll spend or whatever remains. So this was their mindset, which was there. But now, what is the current mindset? First you earn, then you spend, then you pay your EMIs. Because at this point in time, either you have personal loans, or you have your housing loans, some or the other loans, at all times someone has. So saving becomes a very difficult aspect at this point in time, because you're not left with any money end of the day. So I think it's important for you to understand where you actually stand. And like it says over here, either you're spending for life, or or life for spending. So in financial planning, I think it's very important to understand what your goals are, what your dreams are, what your responsibilities are. There are obviously certain goals that may be critical, and some that are non-critical. When you're talking about critical goals, I think it's important for you to understand your child education, your child marriage. That is something that is very critical, and that is going to happen at some point in time. Your other mandatory goal is having an emergency fund, making sure that you're properly insured, your healthcare and your retirement corpus. Once you retire, there is going to be no source of income. So it's important that you create a corpus for yourself, so that post your retirement, you're able to maintain the same standard of living that you're actually maintaining right now. So it's important for you to understand what your goals are. Obviously, property, car, vacation, these are goals that everyone has, but they are still something that that not might be a top priority. What you have to understand, and this may again vary from person to person, it is customized from person to person. but your responsibilities, your mandatory goals, have to be your top priority, and your dreams will eventually follow. So in goal planning, you have to make sure that your goals are realistic, they are not imaginary. You have to make sure that you actually prioritize what your goals are. Again, this may vary from person to person, but you should prioritize what is important for you, depending on what your lifestyle is, depending on what your standard of living is, depending on your cash flows. It is important for you to understand. Some goals have expiry dates. Again, your daughter education, your child education, your child marriage, that is going to happen at some point in time. So you have to be prepared for the worst. And another important aspect I think that people usually ignore is inflation. So if you see the value of 100 rupees say 10 years back and value of 100 rupees now, and even 100 rupees going forward from here, it is going to be is going to be a massive difference. What you're spending right now, you're probably going to be spending 4 or 5 times of that 5 months down the line, because things are going to get expensive. So it is important that you understand inflation. So now looking at this image, I'm sure none of y'all are able to gauge that what this image is like. What am I trying to say through this? But if I give you this image and then I give you this puzzle, I'm sure that all of y'all can correlate to it and build your puzzle. So the point being that you should know what you're creating. Just blindly investing without knowing where this is going to land you, if this is going to be sufficient for you or if it's not going to be sufficient for you, you should actually know where you're creating, where your investments lie, what are the benefits of it. So this is something that is of primary importance. Just the last couple of slides, how and when to start and what is the best time to start. So I've just taken a simple example. You're going to invest till you're 60, and the compounding, your rate of return is going to be 15%. I'm a person who is 20 years old, and I am investing say 2,000 per month from 20 years till 60 years per month. So what is the wealth that I'm actually creating? I'm creating 4.67 crores by investing only 2,000 per month when I'm 20 years old. Now, say for example, I start investing late, say when I'm 30. So if I want to create the same amount, say 4.67 crores, I need to start investing 8,400 per month. So which is, starting 10 years late means that you have to invest 4 times of what you were initially investing. Again, say that I was not able to invest when I was 30 and now I'm 40 years old. What is the amount that I require? So if I'm 40 years old and I need to create a corpus of 4.67 CR, I need to invest 35,000 per month. Say from 40 years to 60 years, that is what I actually need to invest to create 4.67 CR. And the final scenario, if I'm 50 years old, I need to invest 1,80,000 rupees per month to reach 4.67 CRs. So the main point to be taken from this is that you need to understand what power of compounding is, what is the benefit of starting early. You can actually see your money grow, even if you're 20 years or 30 years, if you have an investment horizon of 10 to 15 years, if you do not put all your eggs in one basket, if your portfolio is well diversified, you have you have investments into equity, you have certain investment into debt, into a guaranteed product, you have some percentage of your portfolio into gold, then I think you can actually see what wealth creation is, because you will be able to create wealth because you've distributed your wealth. You're not just dependent on one asset class, you've distributed your wealth wisely, you have started early. And again, I think there is nothing like starting early. Even I think if you've not started, this is one of the best times to start, because everything is at you can say at a certain discount. So yeah, I think it is important to start early. Now again, as per the previous slide, say in the A scenario, say if I'm 20 years old, all I've done is I've invested only 9.84 lakhs. So taking 2,000 per month for 40 years, I've invested only 9.84 lakhs, and my 9.84 lakhs has converted into 4.57 lakhs. So my capital that I have deployed is only 2%. Similarly, in the other cases, as you can see, taking say D, when I'm 50 years old, 46% of the money that I've got is the money that I have already put in. So out of 4.67 CR, 2.16 CR is what I actually invested. So the appreciation that I have got is only 2.51 CR. So this is just another example of starting early. I think the best thing to do right now is to consult your financial advisors to understand where your investments lies, what is the best scenario for you depending on your cash flow and liquidity. So I am done with my PPT. I hope that you've understood the tax implications of the old and new tax, as well as what the current scenario of the COVID-19 is, and what is the importance of financial planning. And I think I'll be happy to take questions from now. So Manoj, over to you now.
Thank you, Mihir. Thank you once again for providing us with useful insights about the current market volatility, the new tax regime versus the old tax regime, and some tips about financial planning as well. There are a few questions that I would be more than happy to ask you. Please answer according to the information that is available, and obviously, uh, what is by default? And the question comes from Mr. Mahesh. What is by default regime for salaried person or probably CTC whose CTC is up to 5 to 6 lakhs? Me, your answer, please.
Yeah. So, sir, you have that option. So, obviously, by default, you will fall into the old slab. But you have the option to choose because you're a salaried individual. You have the option to choose, if you want to opt for the old regime or the new regime. So, your income or something does not, matter in that perspective. You can obviously, consult a tax expert and see what is more beneficial for you, but you have that option with you.
Thank you. And do you offer guidance in shares and stock market? Mir, I think best person to answer is you.
Yeah. So, sir, like Manoj sir had explained, what we do as a company, so wealth advisory and tax advisory. So, in terms of wealth advisory, obviously, stocks and the equity market being a major, aspect of your wealth, that is something that we proactively do, and obviously, that is one of the major advices that we give clients, depending, doing our analysis and our research. So, to answer your question, yes, we do that on a very proactive level.
Another question from Mr. Shrikant Jadkar. How is the 1 lakh crore package going to benefit a salaried taxpayer? I mean to say, he's getting calls from banks again, loan against credit cards. So he does not see this as a benefit. So I mean to say, could you just give some tidbits how this 1 lakh crore package that we were talking about during the webinar, how is it going to affect the salaried payer?
Okay. So, sir, the entire idea of RBI doing something like this was that to ensure that there is liquidity in the market. So, your 1 lakh crore, basically, if you see what the RBI has done is that they've reduced the repo rate as well as the reverse repo rate. So, by reducing the reverse repo rate, what it will basically do, and also infusing 1 lakh crore, to answer your question, is that the banks will not keep money with them, or the banks will not keep money with their RBI. What they'll do is, going forward, they'll give these money to the customers, be it in terms of loans or even to certain companies, to make sure that their working capital is not affected. I think working capital is one of the major things that a company faces. I mean, that is their basic expense to run their businesses. So, to make sure that the banks are also see some benefit in giving it ahead to the customers, to these small and medium enterprises, or any business for that matter, to make sure that they have money so that they can sustain in the long run, so that these businesses do not going forward shut down. uh, that is why the RBI has infused a package like this, most importantly, to infuse liquidity.
Another question: if someone has to enter into equity market at this current situation, which segment will be better? I guess that answer was given by Mihir in one of the slides, but I would like to reiterate. Mihir would be able to throw that answer once again.
Sure. So if you want to enter equity at this point, investing into large cap mutual funds, investing into the Nifty index itself, which again comprises of all your top companies like Reliance's, HUL, all your large cap companies, because these are the companies that going forward may not have that cash crunch. They may not have liquidity problems. So again, if you want, again, I think it's important you understand what your risk appetite is. Direct equity obviously is a big risk, But if you want to enter into that segment, your large cap and your blue chip companies is the best bet. When you're talking about mutual funds, avoid mid cap and small cap companies. Try and go for large cap and blue chip companies. And also, if you're talking about from a a sectoral point of view, which segment can be better, again, like I discussed previously, pharma has a massive potential. FMCG will give you that stable growth throughout the years. It may not give you over and above returns, but that is something that will always remain stable. So pharma and IT are spaces where you can actually enter, because that's where India is actually at a benefit.
Okay, I have a question from Mr. Shubham Sharma. For beginners who want to start with savings and financial planning, is starting with SIP a very good idea?
Of course, I think starting SIP at any given point is a good idea, because that's where SIP is something what you call a disciplined investment. So if you want to stay disciplined, if you want to create wealth going in the long run, there is nothing like SIPs. So I think without a shadow of a doubt, for savings as well as financial planning, SIP is one of the most important factors, one of the most key components. So to answer this question, yes, definite yes to start SIPs.
Another question Mr. Suhas Joshi has asked. His question is whether deduction under Section 80E, which is interest on higher education, is it available in financial year 2021?
Yes, sir, definitely. If you're opting for the old regime, so even previously it was, even this year it will, and it will going forward. So obviously that deduction will still remain available. Again, if you're opting for the new tax regime, then that benefit will not be with you. If you're again opting for the old regime, the interest on your education loan is again that will be considered.
Yeah, I have question from Mr. Hitesh Talisara. How to select mutual fund to invest in my horizon for investing for 10 to 15 years? That's a very good question. I would like to take an answer for this. We do have a platform which is available to invest online by the name of finto.in, www.finto.in, FINTOO.in. It's a mutual fund online platform where you can buy your mutual funds. You can see which are the best mutual funds as per your risk appetite. Do have a look. I request all the attendees of the webinar do have a look onto the website. It's available on iOS as well as Android application as well. So go on to the website, go on to the Android app and download the application, and you should be able to choose very well through the host of mutual funds, the schemes that you have. And I also have another question which needs a quick answer to. Overall, which tax planning is beneficial, the new one or the old one? Asked by Mr. Neeraj Kumar.
Yeah, so I think, like I discussed previously, it depends completely upon your saving habits, your deductions and exemptions that you are claiming. If you are someone who is, not taking advantage of the ATC, or if you do not have any housing costs, any EMIs, any HRA, any LTA, then definitely the new one can be more beneficial for you. But on the other hand, if you're, having your life, if your ATC is completely full, you're paying EMIs on your housing loan, then the old one will obviously be more beneficial. Again, I think it's important for you to consult a tax advisor to make sure under the computations based on your specific and customized scenario what is more beneficial for you. But I think answering in simple words, if you're claiming your ATC, your HRA or LTA, then the old one will be more beneficial for you in most scenarios.
Uh, Another question, very important, asked by Mr. Bharat R. Kotian. His company has deducted TDS for salary under old regime, and while he's filing for income tax returns, he wants to know whether he could change it under new regime.
Yeah, so again, sir, I think from my purview, you can do that. You have that option to shift to that regime. I think it's best for you to consult your tax advisor, because for me, right now, to answer this question without knowing what your background is, what your salary is, it would be difficult. But if you want to change and file under the new regime, you can 100% yes, you can absolutely do that.
Thank you, Mihir. Again, to answer a few questions, we do have this Minty online platform. Again, if you have any questions related to your taxes, if you have any questions related to any of the scenarios that you would wish to get an answer to, please go on to minty.app. That's an application that is available on iOS, on our Android platform as well. So you can go on to Minty and you can ask questions. We have certified tax planners, investment planners, also CAs who would be more than happy to assist you. And yes, this is available on across on the website as well. So please do have a look onto the application minty.in. That's the application you can go through. Can we take another quick question? Is it required for one to have all of the above? This is asked by Mr. Mahesh. Is it required to have PPF, VPF, NPS, or any one with the considerable investment would suffice?
Yeah. So, sir, obviously having these is beneficial. Your PPF and your VPF is something I think that you automatically have or you should have if you're a salaried individual. Be it your contribution that you're doing, be it your employer's contribution. So that is one thing I think you should have for sure. Again, NPS. I think you need to understand what your goal of investing into NPS is. If you're just doing it for the purpose of saving that additional 50,000 tax, then I would not advise you to opt for that. But if you think that going forward, this is something to have that annuity, to have that fixed money that you get annually post your retirement. If you think that is beneficial for you, then you can opt for NPS. So to answer your question, yes, PPF and VPF is something that you should have. NPS again, if you're just doing it to save taxes, then no. If you think that based on your customized scenario, if you think that is going to benefit you in the long run, if annuity based model is going to benefit you, then yes, you can opt for an NPS. But again, I think it's better to diversify into other fields, like having certain exposure into equity, into gold, into debt. Only if you're well diversified into this field, then you can opt for an NPS. So NPS you can keep, maybe not, but the other two definitely yes.
Thank you so much, Mihir, for answering all the questions. We come to the end of the webinar. Thank you so much to all the attendees who have listened patiently to the webinar. Have taken, I hope they have taken notes if possible. We'll be sharing the PPT along with the requested HR, and I'm sure that all these details would be passed across. And in case if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to download our applications, the Minty app, which will answer all your questions related to taxes and anything that you would wish to invest into. There is the Fintu app, which is available for all your mutual fund needs. And we have our customer care number 9699 which you could call on. We are available from Monday to Saturday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. We'll be more than happy to assist you there. Thank you so much for joining in the webinar. Manoj signing off from here. Thank you so much, everyone.